Your dog is licking the same paw again. That tongue is not putting the itch out, it is fanning it. The sound is soft and wet, a rhythm you could set a clock to. You see the same spot between the toes. You tell yourself it will pass, but the real reason it keeps returning is not what you think. The act that looks like comfort is the very thing renewing the itch. How can a dog's own soothing become the problem? An itch feels like a small alarm, easy to scratch and forget. But beneath that flicker is a chain reaction, and it begins with a single lick, and your dog's tongue is the first domino in that chain. To see why, you have to understand what an itch actually is. An itch is a signal, a message carried along dedicated nerve fibers from the skin to the spinal cord to the brain. For decades, scientists assumed itch was just a weak form of pain. But in 2007, a neuroscientist named Zhou-Feng Chen at Washington University found a dedicated itch receptor in the spinal cord. He called it the gastrin-releasing peptide receptor. In plain terms, it is a docking station built specifically to receive itch signals. Itch turned out to be its own language, separate from pain. And that language can be spoken louder and louder over time. Now look at your dog's tongue. It looks soft, but under a microscope, it is covered in tiny cone-shaped nubs called papillae. The same nubs scrape meat from a bone and work like a stiff brush when a wild dog grooms its fur. Now think about what those nubs are pressing against. The webbing between the toes. That skin is thin. It is damp even before the tongue touches it because your dog's paws are the one place on its body where it sweats. So the tissue between the toes sits slightly moist all day, like a palm pressed against a window. And every pass of the tongue rakes those nubs across that fragile skin. Here is where the domino effect begins. Beneath the skin sit cells called mast cells. They are the body's allergy sentinels, packed with tiny sacs of histamine. Histamine is the molecule that tells nerve endings to fire, the molecule that makes skin itch. For a long time, researchers believed mast cells only released histamine when they detected an allergen, pollen, dust, a flea bite. But then a researcher named Brian McNeil found something quietly remarkable. Mast cells carry a receptor that acts like a microscopic pressure sensor. His lab identified it, and follow-up research showed that it responds to physical force. Friction, vibration, pressure. The mechanical stress of being poked or rubbed can crack those little sacs open. Histamine spills into the surrounding skin. No allergen required. So what does every lick actually do? Every lick is not just moving saliva around. Every lick is pressing a thumb onto that pressure sensor. Your dog's mast cells carry a version of that same sensor, buried in the skin between the toes. And the tongue is not soothing the itch. The tongue is mechanically milking histamine out of the very cells that cause it. One lick makes the histamine spill. The histamine fires the itch nerve. The itch makes the dog lick again, and the cycle tightens like a knot. But the paradox gets stranger still, because the licking does feel good in the moment. There is a real reason for that. Itch and pain share a narrow gate in the spinal cord. When a stronger signal arrives, like the scrape of pressure, it crowds the itch signal out for a few seconds. Pain beats itch in that gate. That is why a scratch feels satisfying to you as much as to your dog. So for those few seconds, the licking brings real relief. So what does that relief cost? Zhou-Feng Chen's lab discovered what happens next. The very act of scratching or licking triggers the release of serotonin, the molecule of reward, the body's way of saying this felt good. But in the spinal cord, that serotonin can bind to the itch neurons themselves. And instead of calming them down, it reactivates them. The itch comes back, and in his experiments, it often comes back stronger. The relief is real, but it is borrowed, and the itch collects the debt with interest. That is one loop, the nervous loop. But it is not the only domino your dog's tongue is knocking over. Saliva is wet, and the space between the toes is dark, warm, and almost impossible to dry. Every lick soaks the fur and softens the skin. Veterinary dermatologists call this maceration. It is what happens to your fingertips after an hour in the bath, when the skin turns soft, swollen, fragile. And what moves into that warm, wet pocket? There is a yeast called Malassezia. It lives on every dog's skin in small numbers, but it loves moisture. There is a bacterium called Staphylococcus pseudointermedius. It lives in the same neighborhood, and it loves broken skin. When the skin softens and cracks, both of them multiply. The yeast irritates the tissue. The bacteria slip through microscopic tears and take hold. And now, the itch has a second engine running alongside the histamine. The third domino falls when the skin's protective wall begins to fail. Healthy skin is not just a covering. It is a wall, with skin cells as the bricks. A protein called filaggrin is the mortar that holds them together. A veterinary dermatologist named Rosanna Marcella at the University of Florida showed that dogs with allergies often have weaker mortar from the start. Their walls are already thin, even in places that look perfectly normal. Now add the licking. The constant friction wears the bricks down. The constant moisture dissolves the mortar. The wall opens. And once the wall opens, what gets in? Everything outside. Pollen, dust, household chemicals, the everyday world. The immune system responds to every intruder. Inflammation rises, and inflammation itches. A skin biologist named Richard Gallo found that healthy skin also manufactures its own antibiotics, small proteins that keep resident microbes in check. But when the wall is broken and the skin stays wet, that natural defense falters, and the skin becomes a battlefield. There's a fourth domino. The skin itself learns. Nerves that fire again and again become more sensitive. A light touch that once meant nothing now registers as an itch. This is called sensitization. It is why a small irritation can end with a paw that itches at the slightest pressure. Even the brush of grass can set it off. By then, the original trigger barely matters. The chain reaction has become self-sustaining, and some dogs develop hard lumps between the toes, pockets of inflammation walled off beneath the skin, all because the tongue never stopped. None of this is your dog's fault. Your dog cannot know what its own tongue is doing to its cells. It cannot see the histamine spilling or the bacteria multiplying. All it knows is that in this moment, right now, it itches, and licking gives it 3 seconds of relief, so it licks again and again. You might have noticed when the licking gets worse. It is often at night, 3 in the morning, when the house goes quiet, and then the sound starts, lick, lick, lick. There's a reason for that timing. The body's natural anti-inflammatory hormone, cortisol, drops to its lowest point at night. The brake comes off, inflammation rises, the itch peaks in the dark, and the dog licks harder than ever. If you have watched this happen, you have probably felt a small flicker of guilt. How long did you wait? How many nights did you tell yourself it would stop on its own? Here's the truth that reframes that guilt. Watching and waiting is exactly what the cycle needs. The licking is not a habit your dog will simply drop. It is a wound that renews itself every time it seems to heal. The sooner the tongue is stopped, the sooner the dominoes stop falling. And here's the first good news. Your dog is not broken. Your dog is caught in a loop it cannot see. And you are the only one in the room who can see it. That means you are also the only one who can break it. But there is one more twist. A lot of people reach for an antihistamine at this point. It seems logical. Histamine is the itch molecule. Block it, and the itch should stop. But by the time the paw is red and the licking is constant, histamine is only one of many engines running. The yeast is still there. The bacteria are still there. The wall is still broken. The nerves are still sensitized. An antihistamine alone can feel like trying to put out a house fire with a glass of water. That is why a veterinarian treats this as a chain and not a single problem. Break the mechanical loop first. A cone, a sock, a wrap, something that gets between the tongue and the skin. Repair the barrier with the right creams and washes. Calm the infection, then quiet the itch. Each step removes one domino from the chain, and every domino has to come out or the chain rebuilds itself from the bottom. This is the strange paradox at the heart of your dog's paw. The thing that looks like self-care is self-injury. The act of relief is the act of renewal. The tongue that buys 3 seconds of comfort is the same tongue that fuels a week of itching. And the most loving thing you can do might be the thing that feels the least kind in the moment. To gently stop your dog from licking, to put the plastic cone on, to interrupt the loop the dog cannot see. That is not punishment. It is the first cut in the knot, and the guilt you felt can become the care you act on now. Now you can see the chain. So the next time you see your dog on the couch, working at the same paw, the same spot between the toes, you will know what is really happening. The tongue is not putting out the fire. It is fanning it, and it has been all along, in a rhythm you could set a clock to. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel. There's much more to discover.